What do you make, given current circumstances in the battlefield, about the claim that Ukraine is winning this war and Russia is losing it?
Well, let's just start with basic strategic objectives. Let's look at the Russian strategic objectives first. First and foremost, Russia is seeking to get Europe and the United States to buy into the notion of a negotiated new European security framework. It's something that Russia put on the table prior to invading Ukraine. If people remember back to December 17th, I believe, of last year, Russia submitted two draft treaties, one to NATO, one to the United States, which articulated Russia's stance on what its vision of a new European security framework could look like. They invited the West to read it and have a serious discussion about it, and they were ignored. Then Russia invaded Ukraine, and Russia has two objectives. One is the demilitarization of Ukraine, the other is the denazification of Ukraine. Demilitarization means the elimination of all NATO influence on the Ukrainian military, and denazification means just that, getting rid of everything that Russia considers to be related to the ultra-nationalistic ideology of Stepan Bandera and the white supremacist manifestations of that. Now, these are words that I'm not using. I mean, people go, well, Ritter, yeah, you're very good at Kremlin talking points. I'd advise people to go back and actually read the amendments put by the United States House of Representatives on Department of Defense appropriations legislation from 2015 up until just this year. They continuously forbid funds, U.S. taxpayer funds, being used to train the Azov Battalion, which is listed by the U.S. Congress as a white supremacist neo-Nazi organization. So anybody who wants to pretend that there isn't a Nazi problem in Ukraine, simply I refer you to Congress and its own legislation. The Russians believe that this is a big problem, and they want it eradicated. Now, why did I bring this up? Because Russia hasn't shifted gears at all. I mean, Russia's still saying we want a European security framework out of this, and we are adhering to our original objectives. Russia hasn't altered course at all. Ukraine, on the other hand, is saying that victory can only be achieved when Russia is evicted from all territory, including Crimea. I would say that Russia is closer to achieving its objectives than Ukraine is to achieving its objectives, which tells me Russia has the momentum, Russia has the initiative, and Russia has realistic objectives that can be attained. Ukraine doesn't. I mean, there's just literally no one on this planet besides maybe, I don't even think the Ukrainians believe it, that they're going to recapture Donbass, that they're going to recapture Kherson, Zaporizhia, that they're going to recapture Crimea. This is fantasy. So you have one side that their objectives are fantasy based. You have another side whose objectives are, while difficult to achieve, are very realistic. So I'll go with the realistic side over the fantasy side as to who I think is going to prevail. Then we take a look at capabilities. For certain, Ukraine had a good September. There's no one that's going to debate that issue whatsoever. But at what cost? And what I mean by that is in order to achieve this good September, Ukraine had to absorb billions, tens of billions of dollars worth of NATO equipment. It took months to do this. It took months to get people trained on this, to bring the equipment in, to match the equipment with the people, organize it, and bring it to the battlefield. And then in 1 month, Ukraine pretty much burned through everything. The casualties they've suffered have been horrific. They've lost the equipment, they've lost most of the manpower, and they're down to a position now where they're begging the West to help them reconstitute this capability. Russia started September with pretty much the same force structure that it brought in when it invaded in February. And what had happened is Russia pretty much had insufficient resources to the task they had set forth for themselves. They had many parts of their defensive line that were stretched thin. And the Ukrainians were able to exploit this. And the Russians wisely, I believe, traded territory for lives. The Russians aren't in the business of just throwing away Russian lives. And so they weren't going to hold on to a strong point and defend it to the last man. They were more than happy to withdraw, trade territory, save lives, consolidate their defensive positions, all the while inflicting what should have been prohibitive casualties on the Ukrainians, tens of thousands of losses. Meanwhile, while Russia is consolidating their lines, they're reinforcing. Vladimir Putin ordered the partial mobilization. 300,000 reservists have been called up. 87,000 of them are currently deployed into the Special Military Operations Zone. The rest are finalizing their organization into fresh combat units, which will give the Russians tremendous flexibility and operational capacity. So as Ukraine is shrinking its combat capability, Russia is increasing its combat capability. And then we take a look at strategic aspects of this conflict. I think the West made a mistake in misinterpreting Russia's soft approach to the special military operation, going in with fewer numbers than many people thought was necessary, and going in softer, not doctrinally, not using overwhelming firepower, not rolling through, in effect, trying to reduce civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure. While the reduction of civilian casualties continues to be an objective of Russia, the day and age of saying we don't want to harm civilian infrastructure is over. Russia has taken the gloves off and has shown that it can close down Ukraine as a modern nation state anytime it wants to. It's degraded their electrical grid, their power grid. Ukraine has rolling blackouts, and the Russians are taking it easy. Russia could easily shut everything down, but they're not. They're making a point right now that they do this damage. Meanwhile, Russia's just functioning as it is. And then we take it out a step further because it's not just Ukraine that's suffering. You see, the West thought they were going to A, deter Russian aggression, and B, compel Russia to stop its aggression by imposing massive economic sanctions. I think that's the word that was used. Unprecedented economic sanctions. I mean, we were told there were masterful economists, experts in energy security, that had solved the issue of how to shut down this gas station disguised as a nation. All we have to do is cut off their gas, their energy, and they're going to shrivel up and go away. Russia proved that the gas station actually knows more about global energy security than the West does. They flipped the script. Russia's not the nation suffering. Europe is suffering. The entire continent is suffering. America's suffering. What people are talking about, we have a couple weeks left of diesel fuel. I don't think people comprehend what that means when we run out of diesel fuel or we get such a shortage that the prices go through the roof. Because diesel powers the trucks that make the supply line work, that bring food to our stores at a reasonable price. And you start jacking up the price of the cost of transportation, it will be transferred to the consumer. And if you eliminate diesel potential to where transportation is frozen, nothing makes it market. Russia doesn't have this problem. So they've won that battle too. So across the board, from the big picture strategic aspect of the West supporting Ukraine to Ukraine's ability to sustain the conflict, to what's happening on the battlefield, it's advantage Russia, advantage Russia, advantage Russia, advantage Russia. Russia's winning this war. Call it controversial, but that's my take.